A former congregant of mine named Howard attends services most Friday nights. He always sits in the same place, deliberately choosing to create some space between himself and others. He rarely steps into the social hall for the Oneg Shabbat. He likes to come alone, pray with others, and then return home. One day I was talking to another congregant who also attends most Friday nights. We were discussing a work-related issue of his, and I thought that Howard could provide some good advice. I suggested that this congregant talk to him. "Who's Howard?" he asked. "You know him," I replied. "He comes to services every week, sits in the same spot towards the front on the side. You know him, right?" "That's his name?" he said. "I see him every week. I've actually never met him, and I certainly don't know his name." A few years ago, a rabbi learned that an active member of his congregation had resigned. It was unexpected. After all, she had been a long-time member and attended almost every service, program, and activity. The rabbi was surprised to see that she had resigned and reached out to her. When he asked why she had left, she told him, "I came to everything, and I never met anybody." Each of us has a different need when we come to Shul. Some like to be alone with their own thoughts. Others like to be in the company of others. There's a problem, however, if we come to be with others and end up feeling alone and unseen. If that happens, the synagogue and its people have failed. It's been a while since we've had to think about what it means to gather. We've gotten used to and pretty good at creating online communities via Zoom and live stream. And now, as you can see, we're beginning to return to the synagogue. The digital tools we have learned to utilize will continue to be a feature of congregational life. And while some are perfectly content participating in congregational life from the comfort of their home, others yearn to be with each other. We have been apart from one another for a very long time. Because of our protracted period of distancing, many people feel lonely. For those who put the synagogue at the center of their lives, not having the opportunity to sing, pray, learn, volunteer, serve, and even eat in person has resulted in a new form of loneliness. Physicians and mental health professionals describe loneliness as, quote, a subjective feeling where the connections we need are greater than the connections we have. Loneliness has been a feature of the human condition since the dawn of creation. When God saw the first human being, Adam, suffering because he was alone, God remarked, "It is not good for a person to be alone." So God created Chava, Eve, a fitting helpmate for Adam. Our Yom Kippur liturgy and some of the scriptures we share today speak to several important conditions of Jewish life: feeling close to the community, feeling distant from the community, and enjoying moments of solitude that Jewish practice provides. Yom Kippur can be existentially lonely and solitary, even when we are surrounded by others. We sit in the congregation or at home as we do the important and inner solitary work of introspection, reflection, and reevaluation. We look at the ways we missed the mark in the past year. We look ahead, pledging to avoid the mistakes that cause pain or distress in our lives or in the lives of others. The liturgy of the day is shared both in the first person singular and the first person plural, and is recited in many voices coming together. However, our traditional scriptures also shine a light on loneliness and solitude. The Torah portion we will read this morning, explores a powerful dimension of standing together as one in community, bound by a common purpose. Atem nitzavim hayom, you stand here today, all of you. The command is spoken to the people directly. The entire Israelite community, from tribal chiefs to the common laborer, stand together to seal the covenant that God is making with them. They agree to follow God's commandments in exchange for God's protection as they prepare to enter the promised land. I wonder, did everyone who heard these words feel included? Did they feel like they were seen by all around them, valued for who they were? After all, it's possible to be gathered with others, sharing an experience, and yet still feel alone. One Shabbat while traveling, I stood alone in the center of a synagogue's social hall during the Oneg Shabbat. The rabbi had publicly acknowledged me from the bima, and I expected to be welcomed, but not one person came over to greet me or say hello. The good feelings from that uplifting service vanished. I was among others who had just shared a positive Shabbat service together, yet during the Oneg, I felt very much alone. Sadly, this happens far too often in many synagogues. Some people, like my friend Howard, want to sit, pray, then leave alone. But others yearn to make a connection with others. A service can be uplifting, a sermon inspiring, the mood joyful. But if the person leaves without having made a connection with someone else, all of that positivity is for naught. The Torah portion this morning reminds us that while we are gathered as one, wrapped up in the joy and euphoria of the moment, it is important to pay attention to the periphery, to make sure that everyone feels seen, valued, and cared about. Synagogues will either thrive or die based on how thoughtfully we pay attention to our people. I hope Shir Me will earn a reputation for being the most welcoming synagogue in the area. It's not out of reach if we demonstrate care for everyone we welcome into our spiritual home. Feeling seen and valued is important. However, synagogues also provide us with space to experience the solitude we need to help us find greater clarity and vision. Now, while solitude is not a primary Jewish practice, Judaism provides examples where solitude helped to improve one's life. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, yes, here he is again. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav used to wake up early in the morning, go out into a field, and pour out his heart to God. He would talk out loud to God and no one else, and let the words flow freely from his mouth. He spoke words of gratitude, praise, petition, prayer that came from the heart. This solitary practice prepared Nachman to join his community for the morning minyan once he returned from his alone time in the field. The Haftarah for Yom Kippur afternoon is the story of Jonah. He teaches us about overcoming challenges by gaining clarity about his purpose through an unexpected solitary period of time. When first called by God to speak to the people of Nineveh and tell them to change their sinful ways, Jonah did not have the mindset to accept God's call. So he fled. Thinking that he could get away from God, he isolated himself in the bowels of a ship. And when a huge storm began to toss the ship about, the sailors realized that God was causing the waters to swell because God was angry with Jonah. In order to save their own lives, they had to find Jonah and hurl him into the sea. After they did, the storm abated. The waters calmed, and the ship and its crew survived. And Jonah? A large fish swallowed him. For 3 days he sat in the belly of the fish. It was that contemplative, solitary silence that allowed the prophetic purpose of his mission to germinate. When the fish belched him up onto dry land, Jonah was now ready to fulfill his prophecy. That alone time enabled his mind to settle and prepare him for the task he knew he needed to do. The story of Jonah teaches us that removing distractions and focusing on the present is an essential part of Jewish living. We may feel angry or frightened that God has abandoned us or is asking too much of us. If we sit with our feelings in solitude rather than run from them, we may be able to better understand what we are called to do. Many years ago, I participated in a series of Jewish mindfulness retreats. Much of our time was spent in contemplative silence. We meditated in silence, we hiked in silence, we ate in silence. Yes, dozens of rabbis living in silence. It is a congregant's fantasy, yes, I know. I began each retreat with many things on my mind that were causing me to be stressed, tense, and anxious. However, after 4 days of meditation, reflection, and study, I emerged with more self-understanding and a greater sense of my purpose. My mind was calm, my stress had diminished, and I was now ready to do what I was called to do. Solitude helped get me there. Over the years, and especially over the past 18 months, I've spoken with a number of homebound individuals. One would expect these people to be among the loneliest in our midst. However, many of them have found meaningful ways to connect with others despite not being able to leave the home. Whether consciously or not, they have adopted the holiness code from the book of Leviticus, which is read on Yom Kippur afternoon. These verses lay out a plan for ethical Jewish living. Feed the hungry, take care of the poor and vulnerable, lift up the fallen, care for the stranger, do not stand idly by, love your neighbor. These sacred acts can provide one with a sense of mission and purpose. Doing for others contributes to the greater health and well-being of our larger community. By performing these acts, we can see that our work and our deeds matter. Our efforts to repair the world one mitzvah at a time can mitigate debilitating effects of loneliness and help us feel connected to others, even when we live alone. We all experience periods of loneliness, just as our prophets and sages did. We can find comfort knowing that we are not alone. When we stand with community and feel a part of, rather than apart from it, our loneliness can be abated. When we spend time in solitude, we can gain clarity. And when we devote ourselves to improving our society, we can find greater purpose and meaning in our lives. May these texts, such an integral part of our Yom Kippur liturgy and day, may these texts inspire us today and all days as we go forth. May our loneliness and isolation abate. May our connections grow. And may we feel closer to God and to one another in all of our work today, tomorrow, and beyond. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be God's will.